Welcome to our next discipleship class in the Bible Made Clear. So last time we went through actually part one of this message that is particularly focusing on design and the argument for God from design and complexity and all that. And so this is still part of point number 3 in the 12 points that show Christianity is true. The last segment of it was the cosmological argument, and then this is argument number 2, the design argument. So we had left off at information and messaging. So we want to proceed now with that, because information and messaging are required actually for design. So information is intentional. And I know that a lot of what we're going to walk through here is foundational and understandable, but it does demonstrate the fact that there is design, and these things cannot exist apart from design. Intentionality reveals purpose, and obviously if there's no God, everything is random. There's no intelligence or purpose or intentionality in any way, and information comes from that source. And purpose is the result of a will. So all these require a person, a being. Messages also require a mind. So minds determine the messages, and then the messages are from intelligence. So you have intelligent design. And again, just as a reminder, intelligent design is not creation science. Creation science is really the study of how God created everything, and focuses on that, where intelligent design is really the science of looking at what is there and then working from effect back to cause, and realizing that what does exist cannot exist on its own unless there is intelligence, because the design is the main evidence of an intelligence, or as we're looking here at information and messages, you need a mind, and minds have intelligence to design. Nobody designs something unless they want to, and they put the effort into it, even from a human perspective. And things that are not designed, those things are very evident for us. Now, if we came upon a rock that had this carved into it, we would obviously make the assumption that somebody did it. This is not just the random blowing of wind, right? So this is a result. Is this the result of random wind blowing gravel or a mine? Obviously, somebody had to do that. And that's what is being communicated through that message. So number 3, we're going to look at specified complexity. Things have a specific complex nature to them in design, and it reveals intelligent design, and it requires an intelligent designer. So, again, this is straightforward. We're also going to look at unspecified complexity, which reveals no intelligent design. Though there may be complexity to it, there is no designer, because it is just unspecified and random. And we'll then look at irreducible complexity, right? Reveals intelligent design. Irreducible, to reduce things to an irreducibly complex level is showing you that the component parts can only be devolved, in a sense, to a certain point, and it can't be increased. So we'll look at the example of that, but basically irreducible complexity means you cannot break everything down to its starting point and then assume that it just somehow evolved gradually up to where it is today. And we'll take an example in that. But it requires an intelligent designer also, and that'll be clear by the illustration. And it reveals a purposeful design especially, and then which requires a purposeful designer. So there's two types of causes that we look at. We have intelligent causes, and they are obvious. Somebody has made that. Somebody thought it out, put the effort into it, and designed it. Then we have natural causes. That's the difference. I think that the pictures make the case. It's obvious. It's very simple and straightforward. But one requires intelligence, the other doesn't.
Well, if it is that 99.999% of this universe cannot sustain life, and in the 0.0001% that can, this planet, it can't sustain life in certain parts, it can't sustain life during certain times. 80% of living organisms have gone extinct. So, I mean, you're really trying to take this life existence and credit it to a designer. I mean, it's a crappy design. I mean, if God designed the universe, why can't 100% of the universe sustain life?
Okay, well...
And how come... Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No. It's a good question. It's the dysteleology question. I mean, if there is a God, why aren't we designed better? Or why isn't there more life out there? Well, first of all, there's no way of knowing without knowing the intentions of the designer. I'll give you an example. Stephen Jay Gould, who was an evolutionist who taught at Harvard University for many years, wrote a book called Panda's Thumb. And what's Panda's Thumb? Well, he was saying that the panda had a very bony protrusion that came out of its hand. It wasn't an opposable thumb like we have. And he thought that this was not an adequate design for a panda. Well, there's no way you can know whether it's an adequate design or not unless you know the intentions of a designer, right? You'd have to know what the intentions were to say whether or not the thumb it had was good enough. Well, it turns out that thumb allowed the panda to strip bamboo and eat. It didn't allow the thumb to write books on a typewriter like Gould did. Okay, well, so what? Because something is not designed perfectly doesn't mean it isn't designed. Your car is not designed perfectly, but somebody designed it. And in a world full of a fallen world like we have, a material world, there are, engineers call it optimization. This laptop is designed for running these presentations, but it can't run NASA. Why? There's not enough computing power in here. So you wouldn't say that this laptop, it has crappy design because it can't run the whole NASA program. But you might say it has good design for being carted around the country and running PowerPoint presentations. What is the intention of the design? You can't say something has bad design unless you know the intention of a design. You can't say a car is not designed properly because it doesn't carry 15 passengers if it wasn't designed to carry 15 passengers. It was a Volkswagen Beetle is intended to carry a half a person, right? Okay, it's not designed to carry 15. You can't fault it. You have to know the intentions before you can say something's not designed properly.
So that obviously makes a great case, and so that we can understand some of the context of this intelligent design issue. Now, as I show you these things, Dr. Frank Turek ends up interacting with students and other folks out at universities where he does the I don't have enough faith to be an atheist presentations. He does a great job answering questions, so we'll have him leafed in, as I usually do throughout the presentation, to just kind of confirm and bolster a point. So this is specified complexity, right? If you saw a skywriter, right, it requires an intelligent designer. And this is unspecified complexity. Just these rocks are random, right? Requires no intelligent designer, right? And it's non-repetitive and random, okay? So you're not going to go to a whole bunch of places in the world and see this precise rock configuration. It is the effect of the random natural weather. This is specified complexity. And you're not going to see this in a whole bunch of places unless the same or somebody else with the capability chisels them out. So it requires an intelligent designer and is not a random occurrence. So unspecified complexity, right, requires no intelligent designer, non-repetitive and random. Specified complexity requires a designer and is not random in its occurrence. So it's not like you would just, knock this sandcastle down, come to the beach the next day, and somehow the waves would make another one. That's not going to happen. Now, intelligent design is obviously from an intelligent being. And if you, which again, Turek is going to go through this, but if you saw this cereal box tipped over on the breakfast table and it said, take out the garbage, Mom, you would know that Mom wants you to take out the garbage. You are communicating. This is a message. This is from a mind. This is not just something that would happen random when the box falls over. And it's the same thing with the genetic code, with DNA. DNA, you get this 4-letter alphabet, and it's very complex. So with this, are the building blocks of life. This is not something that just happened to get put together randomly over millions of years. It's not possible. It's a code. Codes require a language for them to be based in. Anybody that knows anything about computers and programming realizes that, any of the computer code, whether it's operating code or application code for specific programs, is based on nothing but zeros and ones. That's how computers work. And those zeros and ones come off of a circuit that is either has a plus 5 volts voltage for a 1 or no voltage for a 0. That is the computing language. It's zeros and ones. And then based on that language, you can then develop programs through establishing that language into code. But you cannot have a code without a language that undergirds it. It's not possible. If I wrote on the board SOS and said, what does that mean to you? Well, in most countries around the world, they would probably say, well, that means distress, save our souls, save our ship, whatever. But the only reason that's known is because it's axiomatic. In other words, the SOS on the board is a code that represents something from a language that has already been communicated. That's why people would know what it is. It's almost universal. So if you're stuck on an island and you spelled out SOS, people would know flying overhead you were in distress. But that doesn't exist without the language that is there ahead of time that you can develop the code from. And DNA is no different. So if you have non-living matter, you just have nothing but random, unorganized chemicals. Well, you have a living organism, and it's now a code. And it's very specific, and it's very, very complex. So an amoeba, which was thought years ago when Darwin was writing to be nothing but a simple cell or just some protoplasm or whatever, we've now discovered, obviously, through advances in technology and being able to look into the cells, that all cells are very complex. This amoeba is very complex. And so one amoeba is equal to 100 or 1,000 volumes of an encyclopedia. That is the DNA in each cell. So first life requires an intelligent cause. You cannot have that kind of complexity randomly occur just with enough time. That's not only absurd, okay, it's not possible. That is what gave rise to the intelligent design movement, because even within the intelligent design movement, there are atheists or there are agnostics. They may not believe in God or that God exists, but they know there is some intelligence necessary for life to exist and for what we see and what we can observe. They know that because that's what the evidence reveals. to say that natural selection through time is going to do this is the most unscientific perspective a person can have.
Not only is the universe amazing, but so are you. You know what this is? This is a one-celled amoeba. This is the amoeba that the Darwinists say we all evolved from. You heard of the theory of macroevolution? From the goo to you via the zoo? This is the goo. Or from the infantile to the reptile to the crocodile to the gentile? This is the infantile. Now, in Darwin's day, that amoeba was thought to be a very simple, simplistic little blob of protoplasm. Wasn't anything too complicated. Maybe it could have come together by natural forces. Today we know otherwise. How do we know otherwise? Well, in order for me to explain it to you, let me take you to your breakfast table. How many people in here like alphabet cereal? You like alphabet cereal? Let's suppose you're a kid. You want to have a bowl of alphabet cereal? You come downstairs one morning to have a bowl of alphabet cereal. You get to the kitchen. You see the alphabet cereal is knocked over and on the placemat, the letter spelled, take out the garbage. Mom. What are you going to assume? The cat knocked the box over? Earthquake shook the house? No, you're going to say that's intelligent design from an intelligent being. Mom. Right? Or let's suppose you're laying out on the beach one day and you look up in the clouds and you see drink Coke. What do you assume? Unusual cloud formation? Wind coming from the north? Oh, it's cloud evolution. No, you immediately go, I don't see a skywriter up there, but there had to be one. Why? Because that's intelligent design from an intelligent being. Natural laws don't make messages like that. Well, natural laws don't make messages like that, and I hate to tell our evolutionist friends this, but they don't make messages like DNA either. DNA is a four-letter genetic alphabet that every living thing has. You have DNA, I have DNA, a banana has DNA. And DNA can communicate information much like the English alphabet can communicate information. It only has 4 letters. English alphabet has 26, but it can communicate information. And it communicates an incredible amount of information. It communicates information just like take out the garbage, Mom. But it's a lot more complicated than that. The question is, how much information in DNA is in a one-celled amoeba? What I'm about to tell you is not from a Christian. What I'm about to tell you is from Richard Dawkins, one of the most vociferous, ardent evolutionists out there. The man who wrote The God Delusion. Well, in his previous book, The Blind Watchmaker, Richard Dawkins admits that the amount of information in a simple amoeba, so-called simple, is about equivalent to 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. I don't have enough faith to believe that that resulted by natural law. I mean, to believe that that resulted by natural law is like believing that the Library of Congress resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. I don't have enough faith to believe that. It takes more faith to be an atheist than to be a Christian. The first life requires an intelligent cause, and all subsequent life requires an intelligent cause too. I don't have enough time to get into how incredible you are. You know how many cells you have in your little toe, for example? Give you a visual. Just look at your little toe, ladies. Your little itty-bitty toe. You know how many cells are in there? The number of cells in your little toe are about equivalent to a house, say a 3,000 square foot house, filled from floor to ceiling with little baby peas. Each pea representing a cell. You know how much information is in each cell? 25,200 page books in every cell. I don't have enough faith that that resulted by natural law.
So, again, I think Frank does a good job in giving you the detail. Here is some more on DNA.
If simple water molecules that form ice crystals exhibit magnificent structure, consider the design ingenuity behind large, complex molecules such as DNA. DNA contains the blueprint for all life and is by far the densest information storage mechanism known in the universe. For example, the amount of information contained in a pinhead volume of DNA would fill a stack of books 500 times higher than from here to the moon. The program code and design of such an incredible system indicates a supremely intelligent designer.
The evidence to me that just cries out that there's a God is the study of DNA. DNA is a very powerful, massive information storage system. In fact, DNA that makes up our genes actually is like books of information that's read by a language system. It's absolutely phenomenal. And scientists know today that languages, a code, only come from an intelligence, and information only comes from information. Nobody's ever seen matter by itself give rise to a code. Nobody's ever seen matter by itself give rise to information. And as you look at DNA, it actually cries out, in the beginning, God created the universe.
We all begin as a single cell the size of a period at the end of a sentence. How does that cell know how to build a body with 100 trillion cells in it, thousands of different kinds, and each one of them is so complex, nanochemical machinery beyond our comprehension how it works, and encoded is the instruction manual. It's the manufacturer's manual how to build and operate every part of this incredible body made up of 100 trillion cells.
Furthermore, DNA is a three-dimensional molecule that is self-replicating. Each molecule is able to make an identical copy quickly and efficiently. The Lord has even programmed DNA to detect and correct replication errors. These sophisticated capabilities far exceed man's means.
God has created the DNA molecule in such a way that it is self-correcting. There are special proteins called enzymes that go up and down the DNA molecule looking for and making repairs on a minute-by-minute, second-by-second basis. God created us with a DNA code that actually has what we call editase or editorial type enzymes. Just as an editor reads a newspaper or a book looking for mistakes, so God has created special enzymes that go up and down our DNA molecule, repairing the mistakes in ways that are unbelievably complex.
There are many examples in creation of things that demonstrate the biblical God. One would be in our very DNA. Our DNA has information in it. And there is a whole field of scientific study called information science, which studies how information originates, how it's transmitted, and so on. And one of the laws of information science says that information never originates by itself in matter, never spontaneously comes about. Anytime we trace the copying of information back to its source, it always comes back to a mind. And since we have creative information in DNA, that tells me that DNA comes from intelligence. It's not something that could possibly come about through millions of years of mutations and natural selection. That just won't work.
Yet even the DNA molecule is simple compared to cells. All life consists of cells, and each cell functions as a miniature city. When we consider that a human body consists of trillions of cells working together as one unit, we should be in humble awe of our Creator's intimate care and perfect wisdom.
So that's that was a great video. I always like showing that because I think they just did a great job in showing the complexity of it. This one is on the kinesin. I love this thing.
Cells are full of specialized components that perform functions vital to their existence. But how do these components get to the right locations inside the cell to perform their functions? For larger components, a transportation system is needed. Meet the kinesin. Masterpieces of microengineering, kinesins are miniature motorized machines that carry cargo from one part of the cell to another, walking along self-assembling highways called microtubules. Known as the workhorses of the cell, kinesins have 2 feet, or globular heads, that literally walk 1 foot over another along the microtubule, pulling their cargo to its destination. Each foot possesses 2 special locations, called binding sites, that interact with other molecules. One site attaches to the microtubule, and the other binds with ATP, the energy molecule of the cell. When one foot binds with ATP and uses its energy, the foot flips over, resulting in the walking motion. Each foot has a short neck, which is connected to a strand of a long coiled stalk. At the end of the stalk is a fan-shaped tail, which holds tightly to the cargo being transported. Kinesins can carry cargo that are many times their own size. Sometimes a kinesin is in danger of getting stuck on the microtubule highway because of blockages caused by other cellular components. To get around such obstacles, multiple motor proteins may be used to carry a single piece of cargo, together providing enough force to break free. Kinesins typically walk away from the center of the cell and toward the cell's periphery. The kinesin's 2 feet work together efficiently, with 1 foot holding fast to the microtubule, while the other releases itself and takes a step forward. This coordinated stepwise movement allows kinesin motors to walk as many as 100 steps per second, moving about 8 nanometers with each step. When not carrying cargo, kinesins can shift to energy-saving mode to conserve fuel until their next job. The kinesin plays a vital role in many cellular processes, not just transporting materials, but also aiding cell replication. The walking kinesin molecular machine, another example of intelligent design.
That is such a great video. I love that thing. And I mean, nobody can, this is only one cell function, just one. Nobody can look at this kind of particular design and complexity and think that it just somehow randomly happened. I mean, as it's moving, you got a self-assembling tubular highway. There has to be a constant movement of intelligence even fed into this system while it's happening. It's not random. There's nothing random about it. It's just amazing stuff.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Darwin wrote The Origin of Species in 1859, published it in 1859. He had an idea of the cell as being quite simple, correct?
Yeah, everybody did.
Okay. If he thought of the cell as being a Buick, what is the cell now in terms of its complexity by comparison?
A galaxy.
A galaxy.
A galaxy.
What do we now know that a cell is? If it's not a lump of jello, what would you compare it to?
It's a nano factory.
If Darwin thought a cell was, say, a mud hut, what do we now know that a cell is?
I would say it would be more complicated than a Saturn V.
So what is in a cell as far as we know now?
A world that Darwin never could have imagined.
The cell may be the most dynamic. It is one mass of activity going on, bringing information out from across the cell, opening doors, closing doors, motor molecules moving along tracks. It is probably one of the most dynamic physical systems in the universe.
We've got this whole automated city. Everything is automated, and it's a level of nanotechnology which would cause any engineer to drool.
It's Broadway without the traffic lights.
That's from the movie Expelled No Intelligence Allowed. I would recommend, if you have never seen it, watch it. I believe it's probably online. Then you can watch it there.
I needed someone who could give me a glimpse into this world. So we went to molecular biologist Doug Axe.
Think of a cell as being a nanofactory, a factory where on a very small scale, digital instructions are being used to make the components of the factory. Here we have the famous DNA double helix. You can see the two helical strands that are intertwined and wind around each other on the outside of the molecule. This is the material that stores all of our genetic information. In higher life forms, this will be the equivalent of something like a gigabyte of information stored in the molecules that form the individual chromosomes, all packed within the nucleus, which is a tiny fraction of the entire cell size. So what does DNA do? Well, the information in DNA ends up providing the information for sequencing the amino acids to make proteins. We have information in a one-dimensional form that provides the information for a three-dimensional form.
I'm finally just beginning to grasp the complexity of the cell. Are there systems within the cell that go well beyond Darwinian evolution? Some type of cellular technology that drives adaptation, replication, quality control, and repair? What if these new mechanisms have massive design implications? Well, I say, so be it.
Yeah, so be it. I mean, you have to go with what the evidence tells you and not have a preconceived notion, and just try to, assume what you're trying to prove.
Sometimes I run into this question or this argument against the teleological argument, which would be the puddle argument.
Yeah.
Which claims that the teleological argument, even though it has specifications that ultimately lead up to human life, it seems that through the puddle argument, it's more like it's just an appeal to pathos than it really is to any logic.
All right, explain what you mean by the puddle argument.
It's like saying, oh, I'm just here. I have every specification to be here. Therefore, I must have like a special reason to be here, and I must have a special cause to be here. And it's not really anything more than that.
Well, I think if I understand the puddle argument, they're saying that the reason there's a puddle there is there's a hole in the ground and it's filled with water, and that's just the way it is, and we're kind of the same way. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, practically.
It's kind of like what we're doing is we see a target, we see an arrow in the wall, and we go up and draw a bullseye around it.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, I don't think that works for a number of reasons. One reason, obviously, is the universe had a beginning, and secondly, a fine-tuned beginning. And you can't make any puddle argument for that, because nothing exists until the universe exists, nothing made of molecules anyway, and it's precisely fine-tuned. If it were changed any way, slightly, any one of those factors, slightly, nothing would exist or nothing livable would exist. Okay? So there appears to be intelligence behind the universe. Secondly, the genome that we mentioned earlier, the 3.2 billion letter genome, is like a software program. If you're walking along the beach and you see in the sand, John loves Mary, you don't go, gee, the waves made that. Or the crabs came out of the water and made that message in the sand, right? You know immediately that that message must be the product of a mind. In all our prior experience, messages always come from minds. Now that's just a few letters long or a couple of words long. But imagine a message 3.2 billion letters long in every one of our cells. If John loves Mary requires a message, a messenger, a mind, then a software program 3.2 billion letters long also seems to require a mind, a great mind, to create. And look, atheists can get rid of the argument from information in DNA by simply answering this question: what natural laws can create messages? There's only 4 known natural forces: gravity, the strong and weak nuclear forces, and electromagnetism, light. Which one of those 4, or combination thereof, can create a software program? The answer is none of them. And if they're going to say, well, one day we'll figure that out, I call that faith. That's called natural law of the gaps.
Yep, that's a good way to put it. So when we talk about irreducible complexity, with this mousetrap, it only has a few components on it. But if you take any one of these away, I mean, you need the wooden platform, you need the spring, you need the catch that latches it, and the piece that holds the bait. If you remove any of those pieces, it's not going to catch mice. It's not going to work. And so something this simple cannot be reduced more in its complexity and still function. So the argument from evolution is that, well, you know, the platform kind of randomly happened, and then the spring kind of randomly got on it, and then the latch and the piece that holds the bait and everything, and somehow, you know, it just kind of developed on its own over time without any intelligence. And this is a mousetrap. This is as simple as they come. However, when we're talking about DNA, we're talking about tremendous complexity. There are certain things that just cannot be broken down and reduced to a level below, because they can't be created or evolved back the other way. In other words, they just would never have come to be through the Darwinian process. So this requires a designer because it has purposeful forethought, and all the parts need to work. They all need to be put together as a system at the one time, not in pieces. So the same thing with cars. You know, you can get to a point where you take a few things away from the car and it's just not going to work. You know, you take in these older muscle cars, you take a distributor cap off one little piece, it isn't going anywhere. I used to work on cars as a kid. Believe me, things don't work exactly right. The car doesn't work exactly right.
Michael Behe has devoted his career to the study of the design and operation of the cell. He has also written extensively on the biochemical challenge to evolution.
Most people have no idea of how small and complex cells are. A typical cell from you or me, called a eukaryotic cell, is probably 1/10 of the size of the head of a pin. And yet in that single cell, there are about 3 billion units of DNA making out the chromosomes. And those 3 billion units make the molecular machines of the cell, literally machines that make the cell work.
With computer animation, we can enter the cell. Here, the staggering complexity of its molecular machinery is clearly seen.
It's like going into an automobile factory. The factory has a large number of machines. The parts have to fit together in very specific ways to do their jobs, and if things go wrong, the cell is in big trouble. And just one cell is enormously complex, but humans, you and I, are made from trillions of cells, and those trillions of cells have to fit together in the right way and do their own job. Darwinism was a lot more plausible when we were thinking about globs of protoplasm than it is when we're thinking about molecular machines.
Each of these biochemical machines is a masterpiece of engineering and nanotechnology. They are essential to functions as vital and diverse as vision, photosynthesis, and the production of energy in the cell. Michael Behe has studied several of these machines, including the flagellum, a remarkable rotary motor.
I remember the first time I looked in a biochemistry textbook and I saw a drawing of something called a bacterial flagellum with all of its parts in all of its glory. It had a propeller and the hook region and the drive shaft and the motor. And I looked at that and I said, that's an outboard motor. That's designed, you know, that's no chance assemblage of parts.
And the chance assemblage of parts, again, cannot reduce that bacterial flagellum less than what it needs in all its components to function. There would be no function in the ad hoc piecing of these things together, and that's what people seem to miss.
In Darwin's Black Box in 1996, Behe spotlighted and made famous a number of really interesting discoveries that had been occurring in biochemistry and cell biology over the last 2 or 3 decades. And what biologists, molecular biologists, cell biologists, microbiologists have been discovering is that at the level of individual cells, there are little tiny examples of nanotechnology, little tiny machines at work. The flagellar motor is the one that Behe made most famous. It's a rotary engine that powers a whip-like tail, a protein tail that functions like a propeller, and it moves the bacterium through liquid, enabling the bacterium to essentially track down its food supply. And this little machine includes a rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, a U-joint, bushings, bearings, and a whip-like tail that functions like a propeller. And the machine in some bacterial systems turns at 100,000 RPMs in one direction and can reverse direction on a quarter of a turn and turn 100,000 RPM in the other direction.
A bacterial flagellum is a true nanomachine, about 40 nanometers in size. It's amazing. I mean, E. coli, salmonella, which are kind of our model systems for the bacterial flagellum, can propel a cell about 20 lengths per second through a very viscous medium, like water, to these organisms. And you extrapolate that to human scale. 20 body lengths per second, 6-foot person, you know, times 20, 120 feet per second. Mark Spitz or Phelps would be setting records with this type of propulsion.
It's hardwired into a signal transduction circuit that allows the bacterium to sense changes in the sugar gradient in the surrounding liquid.
This signal transduction system is actually a short-term memory system where the cell is, if it's going in the direction of an attractant, a nutrient that it can use to metabolize, it follows that chemical gradient. If it's a repellent, it will sense that and move in the opposite direction. So it's more than just this engine.
It's an extraordinary piece of nanotechnology. It's high-tech in low life. And so just by spotlighting these extraordinary pieces of nanotechnology inside cells, and the flagellar motor wasn't the only one by any means, Behe, in a sense, opened up a window for people. He opened up the black box of the inner workings of the cell and said, look, this is much more complex than anything that the early evolutionary biologists had envisioned. Darwin knew nothing of this type of nanotechnology in cells, and at the very least, we've got to come up with an explanation for this.
So, listen, I know I'm playing a number of videos here, but I'm not a scientist, so I figure you need to hear this stuff from guys that are scientists, and that will help make the case here. So this is Behe, right, and Darwin's Black Box, which came out years ago, but it's kind of what started a lot of this investigation into really the lack of capability that exists in the Darwinian evolutionary system, and obviously it cannot answer any of the questions for the complexity and the life that we see now. He said in there, no one at Harvard University, no one at the National Institutes of Health, no member of the National Academy of Science, no Nobel Prize winner, no one at all can give a detailed account of how the cilium or vision or blood clotting or any complex biochemical process might have developed in a Darwinian fashion. Other examples abound, including aspects of DNA replication, electron transport, telomere synthesis, photosynthesis, transcription regulation, and more. I mean, they can't give the answer because there's no way for it to happen without an intelligent designer creating it. Think about the eyeball. What are you going to take away from your eyeball and have it not work? Darwin had no answer for the eye, and no one is going to actually find that answer because it doesn't exist outside of God creating it and designing it. Can't really remove anything out of it, and have it keep working. Now, Behe went on to say, the conclusion of intelligent design flows naturally from the data itself, not from sacred books or sectarian beliefs. Inferring that biochemical systems were designed by an intelligent agent is a humdrum process that requires no new principles of logic or science. Life on Earth, at its most fundamental level, in its most critical components, is the product of intelligent activity. Simply and accurately said. Now, evolutionists reject the designer and therefore design. So we have Francis Crick, right? He was co-discoverer of DNA. He said, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. Well, why is that? Why do I have to keep that in mind? Why do I have to deny my senses, my logic, my understanding of reality, and then just think the way Francis Crick thinks? What would be the evidential basis for that? There is none. Richard Dawkins, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Page 1 of The Blind Watchmaker. Probably not the best way to start out a book against design, but the problem is that he has to tell you that up front, and if it gives the appearance of design, then why isn't it designed? Why do we deny the evidence and what we see in reality and what we understand by testing? Why would we deny that? Why? Because Richard Dawkins wants us to? That's ridiculous. That's a cultic mentality, and it's very dangerous. Richard Dawkins also said in River Out of Eden, the universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. The last quote could probably be said of Dawkins' books. No design, no purpose, nothing but pitiless indifference. Then why would we read them? Why would we read anything anybody writes? If nothing means anything, then everything has lost its meaning. And again, no evolutionist or atheist would say that because they put their own meaning on it, but they're the only ones that are allowed to put meaning. Anybody else is not, and that's part of the problem here. So we are moving towards an hour. We'll get into the central arguments for evolution next time. We've done, quite a bit here on the information and messaging and the intelligent design, but we want to walk through some logical presentation of what evolutionists actually believe evolution is, and why they don't work. So anyways, we'll deal with that next time. But for now, as always, may God richly bless you as you continue to study His Word.